Now before we conquer my top 10 most epic movies of all time, by the way, I wish I had a sword for this video. Like holding a sword as I talk about top 10 epic movies just seems like a necessity. And now I present to you my epic wannabe trailer announcer voice to explain what I consider to be an epic movie. For what do I consider an epic movie? A movie that has a larger-than-life scope. It's a movie that immerses you into the environment and sucks you into the story. For that is an epic movie. And now I present to you the master of disaster, the American of psychos, the man, the myth, the legend, the flick pick. Hey, if you're gonna announce yourself, you might as well make it badass and epic all at the same time. Everything about Zack Snyder's 300 screams epicness, badass, testosterone-driven, covered in baby-oiled Spartans, wearing red capes with airbrushed abs, kicking a lot of Persian ass. This entire movie was filmed in front of a green screen, and it paid off because never once throughout this entire movie did I feel like I was sitting there watching guys fight in front of a green screen. It felt like they were in this environment. There was crazy weird shit happening all over. There's a guy with a hump on his back, and you had King Leonidas, the biggest badass of all of them.
This is Sparta!
Just watching that scene makes me want to kick someone down a well. I know, that technically makes me a murderer, but it has to happen one day. Imagine just doing that. This is Sparta, and you kick him down the well, and like you get arrested a few days later for murder, but you still feel like a badass. The next movie up is Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. Now this film conveys a lot of messages and you can interpret them how you want, but the reason I put this on the list is because the scope of this movie is so grand and widespread, especially some of the shots in this movie where they take place in space, just technologically almost too advanced for their time. This was an epic space sci-fi film that utilized practical effects in 1968, and some of these effects still look better than the shit we're getting today. And the antagonist of the movie was HAL 9000, an evil robot with a calm demeanor. I'm almost scared one day my phone's gonna turn into HAL 9000. A little red dot comes on there and just ruins my fucking life. John, I'm afraid I can't do that. No! Saving Private Ryan, an epic emotional war drama with Matt Damon and Tom Hanks. And Vin Diesel's there too. This movie shows you how brutal war really was while giving you insight to the men who fought it. This film contains one of the most graphic, violent, brutal battle scenes I've ever seen in any movie in my entire life. And it's one of the opening scenes to the movie when they storm Normandy Beach. It's intense and dramatic all at the same time. That's why Saving Private Ryan had to make my top 10 list. The next epic flick on my list is Lawrence of Arabia. How could you do a top 10 epic movies of all time without this? I'm not quite sure, so that's why I put it on my list. Now the scope of this movie just screams epicness, and look what I had to do. I had to lean back in my chair and open my arms up. It's this big. That's how big the epicness is in this movie. This movie has these huge battle sequences with these guys riding horses, and keep in mind, this is a 1962 film. They couldn't just throw a couple thousand extras in there with CGI. They actually had to do these things and choreograph it all to make sense at the same time. And when you see these elements all coming together in these big epic grand battle scenes, you have to respect things like that. So that's why Lawrence of Arabia made my top 10 list. Now for some of you who've been watching my channel for a while, you might have guessed that this movie would make my top 10 most epic movies of all time list. It's The Dark Knight. And no, I didn't just put this movie on my list because I'm a huge Batman fanboy, even though I am. It's a crime drama thriller with a guy named Batman in it. You combine all of those things and you might have an epic movie. But the reason that this movie reaches that epicness level is because it was executed properly by the director Christopher Nolan. And then on top of all that, you have Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker. That alone was enough to make this movie epic. Yeah, every gun makes its own tune. I think that was my Clint Eastwood impression. I'm not quite sure what that was. Either way, the next movie up is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, one of the most epic Western movies ever made. So what makes this movie so epic? Well, it has Clint Eastwood in it. Do I need to say more? The scene in this movie that gets me every time is the final showdown scene between these three men. They're staring each other down in a circle. They have their hands on their pistols and they're ready to go. And then on top of all that, you have the score to the movie, Ecstasy of Gold, the most epic Western song I've ever heard in my life. It just makes me want to jump on a horse and start riding into the sunset. I don't know how to ride a horse, and plus I don't know where I'd find one, but that's what I want to do.
sack of wine.
Best insult ever from Brad Pitt. This movie stars Brad Pitt as the bronze god amongst men, Achilles, who is a badass with a sword. And in my opinion, I always thought this movie was a little bit underrated. Size matters not. Look at me. For the next movie on our list is Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. It's an epic space sci-fi adventure film with everything you want in it, plus more. And the reason I chose Empire Strikes Back out of all 3 Star Wars films, oh, I know what you're thinking. There's 6 of them. Not to me. There's only 3. The originals. But the scene in this movie that gets me every time is that confrontational scene between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. It just sends chills down my spine every time I watch it. The next epic movie on my list is, well, it's not just one movie. I'm going to cheat just a little bit. It's okay, don't tell the teacher. I'm gonna put all 3 Lord of the Rings movies because I'm gonna conclusively call that one long movie. One very long movie, but that is one solid, big, epic chunk of cinematic masterpiece that had to be here on this list. What can I say about the Lord of the Rings that hasn't already been said? It's a fantastical adventure with a badass named Gandalf in it.
You cannot pass!
My preciouses. Okay, that's my Gollum impression. I'm gonna stop right there.
Fly, you fools!
My name is Flickus Maximus Claudius Decimus III, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life and the next. Now, I was kind of paraphrasing things along the way there. Actually, I made up a lot of it. Anyway, the #1 movie on my list is Gladiator. This movie stars Russell Crowe. It's directed by Ridley Scott. It's the story of a general who is made into a slave who becomes a gladiator. There were so many elements that came together just right to make this movie pure epicness. And one of those elements was the score by Hans Zimmer. Yeah, listen to some Hans Zimmer music next time you brush your teeth or put deodorant on. It'll just make it that much more epic. It's literally what I do some days. And if I could go back in time and witness one event, it would be to go back and watch a Roman gladiator fight. Like, I'd be sitting there eating popcorn, like playing on my iPhone. Oh, that's awesome. And everyone's looking at me like, who the hell is this dude? I'm like, I'm just watching the fight. The movie's filled with all these various battle sequences. Each one's different and they all stand out apart from each other. And plus, let's talk about the villain of the movie, Joaquin Phoenix. That man was creepy, and he really loved his sister. Maybe a little too much. Okay, so those are my personal top 10 favorite epic movies of all time. Now here's my question to you, and let me know down below, what is your favorite epic movie of all time? And if you want more epicness, and I use that term very loosely, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.